Three.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are live.
We'll go ahead and start the council study session for Tuesday, June 14th, 2022 at 5:59. Yeah,
We better wait till 6.
we're going to go ahead and start the council study session minutes. Tuesday, May 24th, 2022 at 6 p.m. We'll go ahead and go with whole business, which we don't have any. Can you get your microphone closer right there? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. There's no old business, so we're gonna go. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and go to number 3, new business.
Oh, we gotta go with the old business A, discussion, resolution.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So we're gonna go ahead and go with A, the WCIA, the count.
No, I don't think you can present this.
Sorry. So let me go back and do the Tuesday, June 14th, 2022. Sorry. So the old business, we're going to do A, discussion of resolution 2022-16, declaring certain personal property of the city of surplus and authorizing the disposal of said property on page 10. Any questions on that? Anybody have any questions on A?
I don't.
Judy?
Which ambulance are you getting rid of?
I believe it's the old one that's out there that's just been junked out there for some time. There's an old one out there. I'm not sure on the year. Josh?
It's right there, it's 1996 police on page 10, Judy.
I am on page 10, 96.
It's the
A
second.
police ambulance?
Yeah, that's what they listed as. And it's the 1996.
Yeah,
It's
You
the
don't
yellow and
recall
white
that
one, no?
I
Huh?
believe it is yellow and white.
Yes, I think so.
So what?
A yellow and white.
I thought they took the box off of that to use to spray the streets in the wintertime. Is that the one you're talking about?
I think so. And a surplus, that one.
They're not gonna use it to spray the streets in the wintertime?
I think they're using something else, the big, what do you call it? Josh, what's that truck called? What they're using right now? I'm not familiar with vehicles, so.
So I'm not sure, but I think they're using the dump truck.
Yes.
They set it up somehow.
Little Ford? Okay. I was just wondering which ambulance it was, because I know I went by the other day and I seen they took the box off.
And that's what they were
Gonna use, because it's 4-wheel drive, in the snow and ice.
So if you guys would like to remove it from the resolution, you can do that. Make some changes, but it's up to you guys. Because I can't answer the question, the public works guys are.
Now, I was just wondering,
That might be something you when I ask Joe or go out there tomorrow when the guys are here. That way you can see the vehicle. Judy.
It's the only ambulance that we have out there is a yellow and white one, and they took the big box off of it.
And the box is just sitting there.
They're just sitting there, and because they were gonna use that to spray the streets in the wintertime for ice. They were gonna set it up on that, because it's four-wheel drive.
And
So I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. So we're gonna go ahead and go on to 3. And hi, Bill. Good evening.
Hello, good evening.
And we're gonna go ahead and discussion of contract agreement with the Yakima Humane Society. That's on page 11 through 17. I don't know if y'all had a chance to look at the contract and see the dollar amount. Josh, you want to give us some dollar amount?
Sure. So there's a few options on this contract, and I think that it was kind of up to us to decide which pieces we liked and which pieces we didn't like. So there was a couple of different ways that we could slice this. So there was a full-on, let's see here. What's the first one? Give me just a second. So the first one is for $300 a month, and then that's actually with having an animal control officer to come out while there's working hours to take care of sick and injured animals, but that's on standby, so they don't actually come through unless we ask them to. So that's just to pick things up if city staff has a need for them. And then the other option was for so it's $3,000 a month. That one is to have full-on standby coverage and then have them come through with, and let's see here, for 15 hours a week. So effectively that's like having their own animal control officer from the Humane Society to come in on a regular basis. And then wasn't there another option too? I thought there was one more. I thought there was one more version of that. Let me see here. Mayor, wasn't there a third option?
K,
What's that?
look on K.
K?
Page 12, right?
Well,
Yeah.
page 12. Page 12. So all of that is already, so that has to be a consideration no matter which way we go with this. So anytime an animal's picked up, it's $15 a day for them to hold them, and there's a 10-day mandatory hold if we send something in there. So that has to be with K. But then I thought there was a third way that the contract went, but I'm not seeing it now. Sorry, we should have went through this a little more before the meeting.
So that's all that we have on the
Yeah.
table.
Yeah, that's all we've got so far. And so I think there's some discussion that needs to go through there because for $3,000 a month, we could have our own person rather than paying the Humane Society to have a person, if we think that that's something that's feasible. I know we've tossed that around a little bit before, Mayor. I don't know how we want to open up that discussion, but
So,
yeah, like I said, so that's kind of that's where it's at, though. Like I said, we need to talk about it a little bit.
yeah, I want to get the input of the council and see what they think. I know it's been an issue with the dogs for some time, and we get calls daily about it. So it took a while for us to get this from the Humane Society. So I think that we need to discuss it and, bring it back.
It's a lot of money. I think it's a lot of money. I think we could do something. Don't you
We
think
could
too?
just hire another person and for them to work for the city. This is a lot of money.
We would do like a part-time.
I'd rather go that way myself. Part-time.
Part-time, hire someone and
We'll have to look at the numbers.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So like I said, we haven't looked into it in too much detail. I haven't tried to run numbers or anything on it, but remember, Mayor, that we had that thought at one point that we thought we might do a part-time code enforcement, part-time animal control. So there's, like I said, there's an idea there to kind of synergize, but this is just the first step. We have to see what the Humane Society is willing to offer us before we can say what we're gonna go with. So that's where we're at here.
Okay, so
Some of the other cities are doing like Grandview or Sunnyside.
did you get a chance to look into that, Josh?
What's
To see
that?
what did you get a chance to see what the other cities were doing?
So everyone contracts with the Humane Society that I found in our area. But I can't say which way they go. All I can say is that's where all the dogs go. When they, all the animals, when they get picked up, they go to the Humane Society in one way or the other. To say if they have someone on their own staff or if they have just the Humane Society do it, I can't say. I have to ask a little more in-depth question. But when we first started talking about this, we were trying to figure out which shelter to go with, and everybody goes through the Humane Society. There's not really another avenue for getting rid of animals right now. So that much I can't say. How they do it is another issue.
Why don't we hold this off and do a further discussion and get more info on it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
So we're going to go ahead and go on to B, the discussion of resolution 2022-14, approving the renewal of the small works roster interagency agreement with MRSC on page 18. Does anybody have any questions? Any questions?
No.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and go on to C, the discussion of well samples.
Good evening. As we're making progress on the city's Well 7 project through the design with the hydrogeologist for the project, there were a couple of things that came up. And we talked to staff and the mayor about them, and they thought it best to bring it to council and just get your input. And it was a good opportunity to give you guys an update on the progress of the project. And so really I have two key items that are looking for at least blessing to proceed with. So if you remember, several years ago, the city bought new water rights. We worked through the process. The city received funding to drill a new well. It's, I think, 66% grant. And so we're working through the process with the hydrogeologist of designing the drilling to drill the well and then do the equipping process that puts the pump in the building and all of that in place. That's where we're at in the arc of the project. Ideally, we're hoping for 400 gallons per minute from this well. That's the goal, and that will go a long way to giving the city some additional backup water source. That's the city's biggest water issue. The city's put a lot of money into the water system over the last few years, and the water source is another well is really its biggest need at this point. So it's great. There's a funding package in place to do that. Because funding is not a fast process. Two key issues here. So our goal is 400 gallons per minute. The hydrogeologists are looking at the aquifer, so these are going to be shallower wells. And that was what the water right, if you think about different buckets of water at different depths, your water right is just for certain buckets of water. And so right now, the city's wells are all using a deep bucket of water. That's what the water right is for. Your new water right is for a shallow bucket of water. So that's where we're going to target with this well to let us access those water rights. You can only take it out of the water in the top 200 feet down. Hydrogeologists are saying, depending on what we drill it, we may get a range of flows. We could get 400 gallons per minute. We could get more like 180 to 200. They're being conservative. So what we worked out with them, what we would recommend, and basically look for a blessing from you is, we believe if we practice economy, we can squeeze 2 wells in instead of 1 with the budget. And there's some tricks to how we would do that. And so the idea is drill 2 wells instead of well 7, drill well 7 and 8. If we get 200 gallons a minute from each, great, we got our 400 gallons a minute. If we get lucky or blessed, fortunate, we get 300 for both, and we've got 600 and we're in even better shape. And so it gives us a few more bites of the pie that way. Some of the way we would accomplish that economy to make 2 wells fit in the budget is to put them close to the existing wells. So again, remember, close on the surface. The depth of the wells would be very different, but close on the surface. And that would let us run electrical, reuse some of the existing facilities. We worked with the electrical engineers, and they said, it's all preliminary, right? Because we're not to that phase of design yet. But preliminarily, we could reuse some of the existing buildings and electrical equipment and space, so that you wouldn't have to spend as much money paying for new buildings. You could use the existing buildings with a new well. I've had preliminary conversation with DOH about the sites and about the potential, and they sounded favorable to approving that. I'll need to have a conversation with the funding agencies. I don't anticipate that it would be an issue with them, because our end goal is more water for the city. So if we go with 2 wells instead of 1, if we find a way to be economical, I don't think they'll have a problem with that. And it will all be within the kind of original area of the project, and so that it won't trigger too many environmental issues. So I guess that's the first item. I don't anticipate it being controversial at all, but wanted to kind of make sure that that's okay with the city before we start that conversation with the funding agencies.
Any questions?
What's the location?
That's a great question. I think your best bet, our current best bet, is to co-locate 1 well with well 4. One of the things you have to look at is sewer lines in the area and potential hazards for the well. And well 4, the well 4 gravel area to the west side of well 4 has room that we could drill another well, run the electrical out of that new building that you did a couple years ago with a new addition, and then tie into the city's main water transmission main. The other location that I think is the most favorable is near well 6, and we can reuse some of well 6, the building, and maybe even some of the equipment, the generator at well 6, we can perhaps reuse pending further electrical investigation. And again, it's going to be a very different depth. So they're close together on the surface, but they're looking at very different buckets of water underground. Those are your 2 best bets. We could also look near well 5. But I think in talking with the hydrogeologists, just given that that's your highest producing well and some of that, we kind of want to stay away from that right now. And so those are the leading candidates. And those are the ones I discussed with the Department of Health. And it was nothing in writing, but your DOH engineer is comfortable with those locations. At a bouncing ideas off level.
If the city decided to go that way, June, how long would it be?
to do the project. So we're working on the drilling design. Our goal is to be able to advertise for bids for a driller in the next few months. Some of that depends on the next item for discussion. Drillers are really busy right now, and so the hydrogeologists will start talking to drillers to see when they're scheduled. The hope being that it could be drilled this fall. And then depending on bids, depending on how things go, the potential that the well could be, well or wells could be online at some point next year, depending on a number of things. Construction is really complicated right now with prices and inflation. But that's the idea. Yeah, great question.
Any other questions?
Okay, so should we proceed, I guess, then with that? Okay, great. Second item. As we talked about all along with this well side of the project, back since the very beginning, the biggest risk for this project is nitrates. So there's nitrate in the water. The shallow aquifer all through the lower valley has high nitrate levels. It's a very known, ongoing issue. And the question for us, for well 7 is, well, where is that number going to be at? The state limit is 10 milligrams per liter. So if we're under that, we're good. If we're over that by a little bit, we can blend it with water from the other wells and get it underneath the, we mix it together, we can get it under the limit, we're still good. If it's really high, we're in trouble. And treating nitrate isn't easy. It's a complicated treatment process. And so all along, but since we started the project, we talked about that was the risk. And so in order to try to take our best shot, once the well is drilled, we kind of were stuck with what we got. In order to get our best shot, our thought was it would be helpful to do some study of the nitrate concentration in the surrounding groundwater to see if there's any gradient, which means it's higher in one area than another area, right? So we're, just looking at infrastructure, these two sites make the most sense to drill the well. But if we found out that somewhere else in town had much lower nitrate, we would encourage you towards that. And so what I pitched to, in working with the hydrogeologists, our recommendation to the city staff and to the mayor was that we would help facilitate basically city public works going around sampling a lot of the neighboring wells, people on their own wells or agricultural wells around town, and try to do essentially a net around town, then run nitrate samples on all of them and then see, is it higher? Is it all the same? It'd be good to know. And so we went discuss that a little bit, and one of the part of why we recommend that a city employee do it is just that, both from our hydrogeologist experience, also from DOH, I discussed this with DOH as well. They'll get better results if it's somebody familiar, if it's a city of mapping someone, but if it's some consultant wanting to sample their water, people are understandably apprehensive. And the point is just for the city to gather information to best locate its well. There's some existing data available, but it's not conclusive. It's not enough for us to say clearly one place or another place is better.
I've lost, I can't hear you.
Okay.
You want to turn on your microphone?
Oh, well, that was, there we go. How's that?
It's much better.
Okay, all right. I'm sorry, I didn't even realize the mic was off. And so, in talking with city staff, in order to facilitate that though, because obviously this is a little more complicated, what we can do is have a representative from us or from the hydrogeologist, who would probably be Susan Welland, our water operator who's helped the city in the past, come over and go around with your operator and help collect those samples and help facilitate it. In order to make sure that happens, to make sure that happens and that we get what we need from it. And that's just something that if it would help to do that, our big picture recommendation is to do the well sampling. If it would help, we're happy to have Susan come help. It's not within our existing contract to have her do that, but we can certainly just charge it under general engineering like we have for other stuff. For her to come over, we're hopefully for a day, and they would have it planned out which wells they were going to try to hit, do the best they can to get the samples. Possible if people aren't available, they might take a couple days, but that'd be the idea. So, we would recommend it. If you don't want to do it, we'll drill the wells and see what happens. But we would recommend this just as a due diligence, since this is our shot to drill this well and make it good. So, I guess that is if the question for you guys about the well sampling is if you want to proceed and how you want to proceed with that. Okay, sounds good. Would you like assistance? You have send an operator or somebody to help with that. Is that
I believe so, yes.
okay? Sounds good. Maybe have them.
Thank you. So now we're going to go ahead and go on to D, discussion of the ARPA fund application, page 19-22.
So is this something
Right, that's for
that's
you.
for us to talk about? Okay, for you to talk about. So I don't know, I believe what you have in front of you is the call for projects from Yakima County. So if you remember, cities all receive some ARPA money to spend. County got more, and the county generously is going to share it with some of the cities in Yakima County. And so I believe they have 48 million to distribute across Yakima County to the communities of Yakima County.
Are we in there?
Well, that's what we're wanting to be in there. That's the point of this conversation is it was sort of a, well, we don't want Napton to not get a piece of that pie. So what I discussed with the mayor, and she gave us the thumbs up to move forward, is basically to put a funding app together to see if we can get Napton some money. The project I discussed with Josh, and I outlined for the mayor and Zoe as well, would be kind of a threefold project. We're like, okay, we're already doing a well. That's the city's biggest need. What else? They're going to give us money. What else would we like to do that could be useful and beneficial to the city's water and wastewater needs? So what we looked at was the city's general sewer plan. Looked like the city hasn't really done a sewer project. We did the B Street sewer a few years ago, but other than that, city sewers are pretty old. They're not in terrible shape, but they are pretty old, and there's some roots and stuff clogging, and they kind of go this, and the sewers, you want them to always be like that. So we looked back at some of the projects in the general sewer plan and outlined a project that would replace the trunk lines on the south side of town, underneath the highway up to Washington Street. There's some maintenance issues in that. It would essentially replace the main lines, not the lines that go down each street, but like the main where it all comes together. And that would help the city experience its growth on the south side of town in the general sewer plan, and identified some issues, some dips and sags, and some spalling concrete, I believe, and some root intrusion, where essentially a tree grows in and you get this root ball and stuff can't flow down the sewer line. That was one component we would suggest, recommend you include. A second component was it's a preview. We'll be presenting the water system plan to you guys in the next few months, hopefully. As a preview, your leakage out of your system is over 10%. It's about 15% or 17%. DOH requires to keep it under 10. And so part of the way to get it back under 10 is to replace leaking water lines. So we replaced a bunch of leaking water lines in 2016. We looked back at the water lines, looked for the small diameter water mains. You normally put an 8-inch PVC, which is plastic. Looked at some of your smaller diameter 4- and 6-inch steel lines as being likely sources of leakage. Some of the 4-inch steel, I believe, was put in 1937. I know it because Grant Osborne was doing engineering then, and I have like payment to the contractor documented that was put in. So it's really old pipe, and there's a good chance when you have iron pipe that's 85 years old, there are going to be some leaks. So we identified a couple of projects. I believe one on the north side. You'd replace some pipe on the north side, another pipeline in an alley on the north side, and then also Cedar Street had a 4-inch and 4-inch steel as good projects that would help with some fire flow if there's some development that's talked about on the south side. And then a couple blocks on Main Street, since you're going to pave Main Street next year, it'd be nice to do the water. So those are kind of the water projects we identified as being good candidates. The third piece is good, and I know I talked to Josh, this was the one he got excited about. So when you read water meters, right now, your public works staff have to go individually read each water meter, write it down, and then bring it back and put it in the system. What cities have increasingly gone to is a room called remote read system. There's a little antenna on each water meter, and so when they're ready to read meters, they turn their iPad or the device on, drive around town, and it just remotely reads it. So in the winter, they can still read it. They don't have to worry about snow. People park their cars over the top, they can still read it. And so right now it takes, I believe, like 3 days a month to read all the meters. And with a remote read system, I think I would say it takes about 3 hours or three days a month. Probably takes 3 hours a month. And between you and me, that's probably conservative. One city I just did this for a couple years ago turns the thing on at City Hall, and they instantly read like 90% of the system. And they just have to go drive a couple streets to pick up the meters that can't quite send that far. And so potentially then you would have to replace a bunch of your water meters, do some technology and upgrades, but that would cut down on your man time associated with that, and hopefully reduce some of the errors with reading, because you're not trying to worry about transposing numbers and you guys having a lot of other things to worry about. So that's kind of been one of those projects. I know before Jameson left, she was interested in that as well. And that's kind of one of the projects that I'm like, one of these days, I'll just even have to get a remote read water meter system. So that I estimated around 500,000 install price, because you have to replace a bunch of the water meters and pay for the technology upgrades. And so that's why we're looking for funding, so that's not something the city has to pay.
For that.
Yeah. Yes, and so all this to say, these are the 3 project components that we identified in looking like, hey, city's gonna ask for money. What should we ask for money for? And again, I think this funding is mainly targeted for the city for water and sewer, so we're trying to fit in that box. I get a rough number. I might dial it in a little more. We're still drafting the funding out for city review, and the total ask for these projects was around 4.75 million. And again, it's all grant. And so I may dial that number in a little more, and we'll give the city a draft to review. The funding app's due the 24th. Good news is, one of the questions is, if you only get some of the money, what would you do with it? Because I'm thinking, if there's 48 million and we ask for 4.8 million, will they give us 10%? I don't know. But they might give us some of it. One of their questions is, if you only get some of it, what can you do? And there's some projects, if you don't get all the money, you can't do it. With this project, it's very easy. We just say, oh, well, we'll do just the sewer in the AMR, or we'll just do half the water one. And we can scale it down really quickly. And so that's why, and Nancy Letch and I were talking about, what project should we do and how should we scale it? And our thought was, well, this is a good project. Let's ask for a lot, and all you can do is let us know. So that's where that's at. And I think we'll more look at city of draft in the next week or 2 review, and then submit it on the 24th.
All right, thank you.
You bet.
So we're gonna go to number 4, title. We're gonna go to A, interview for council member candidates.
And there's 2, and so we're gonna go from A through Z, and so we'll start with M, and then we'll do S, okay? But S needs to remove herself from being in here. So we'll have to pull you out, okay? So you go around.
Sylvia,
Yes,
I have a question. Can we table this?
that would be a question you can ask the city attorney. Bill, can you hear us?
Well, one issue would be, I think it was going to be tabled. It may need to be discussed in executive session, what the reasons are, but it can be, but there's been some information from MRSC about that, about whether it should be tabled, that I think would be better to discuss in executive session. But you would have to make sure it doesn't appear that the existing candidates are already being rejected, I guess, by tabling it. You mean tabling the interviews, if I'm understanding correctly?
Yes.
Well, I guess, is somebody going to put forward what the reason would be?
Bill, I think it's because there's only 2 applications, and I don't think it was enough notice for the city. And I think we need more time. We need more applications.
That's how I feel. There wasn't enough application, it was too short of a time. I think we need to go with a longer time frame. That's my opinion.
I would suggest that perhaps we that the applicants wait and we discuss in an executive session and then let them know whether you're going to table it or not.
So could we have an executive session for this?
Pardon? Did you ask me something? I couldn't quite hear you.
No, we
Turn
could
on
have
your
an-
microphone, Diane.
It is on.
Oh, it is, okay.
If we could have an executive session to go over this. Okay. I asked if we could go into an executive session on this. So we could discuss some things on it. Because I believe it was too short notice.
The ad that they put, it's in the daily news, and that's only run once a week. So it was only ran on a Wednesday. So whoever's seen it, only seen it Wednesday evening, Thursday, Friday, and it was closed at 3.
No, it was 2 days, Mary. There's an email right in front of you.
It's not enough though.
But that's not enough.
I really think we need to go on an executive session for this.
Closer to your mic, please.
I really think we need to go on an executive session for this.
That's what I suggest. It's the council's decision whether they want to table it without further discussion, but I would suggest that we might want to discuss some concerns in executive session about whether or not to table it. But
Okay. We're gonna go ahead and go into executive session. 20 minutes. So it is 6:36. So we're gonna ask the audience to step out, please. We're gonna go ahead and go into executive session. See you.